overnight, the St. Louis soccer group released a statement from Jim Woodcock saying that they are committing $240 million to startup funding, as well as taking full responsibility for facility maintenance and potential cost overruns. They go on to say that they'll continue to work with Mayor Slay and Governor Greitens on ways to bring a great project to St. Louis. Now, $240 million in startup funds. It's sort of funny money. What does all that mean? How much of that is money that is going to go to buy the franchise from the MLS? How much of that is going to go to pay for the stadium and to build the stadium and everything else? Remember, they were looking for $80 million, right? Mm-hmm. So instead of looking for $80 million, now they are saying we're going to give $240 million. So very shrewd PR move to go from we need 80 to we're given 240. But right, but where does that go? Where does that go in the city? We're waiting for Christine Ingracia, St. Louis Board of Aldermen, representing the 6th Ward. Christine, welcome back to Big 550 KTRS.
Good morning.
Explain all this to all of us. Where does it go from here?
Right now, we're at a standstill. I'm not comfortable moving the board bill that it contains the funding for MLS board at this time, just because of the time crunch. We have to have information to the Board of Elections no later than January 24th in order to put it on the April ballot for voters. And we still do not have a detailed financial proposal at this time for me to look at or pass along to my colleagues, and there's been no time for public comment on behalf of city voters either.
Ultimately, though, this is to put it on the ballot so that the voters can vote on it. So they'll get the ultimate public voice when they vote.
Right. Unfortunately, we don't really have any information to pass along to them other than arguably between $60 and $80 million worth of an ask. I mean, if you look at what the ownership group is stating they're asking us to fund, it's about $60 million, but it keeps being repackaged and looks to me like about $80 million, which unfortunately is a revenue loss for the city. At the very least, I think we need to pass along to voters something that's revenue neutral, revenue generating, especially in light of the fact that we cannot fund maintenance on Scott Trade Center, the CVC Convention Center, or Dome at this time.
This comment that they made over the overnight that said that they are committing up to $240 million in startup funding, as well as taking responsibility for maintenance and cost overruns. Does that do anything to move the ball further down the road?
I don't have a document that I've seen that articulates that. I've been told that verbally, but as you know, and probably most people understand, when the city undertakes an agreement of this nature, the contract is sometimes hundreds of pages long. That's the same thing that we looked at during the Rams deal, and the only thing I've seen are term sheets.
So you want a more detailed analysis or a detailed plan before you want to go forward with this?
Right. There's no way I can ask my colleagues to pass legislation out of committee or the full board without a detailed financial proposal, unfortunately.
So sitting here where I sit and watch all of this, it seemed like the city of St. Louis and the Board of Aldermen was much more open to trying to build a stadium for Stan Kroenke, who didn't want to be here, and they're putting up more roadblocks for millionaires who do want to be here. So am I wrong in assessing the tea leaves?
I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think the issue is that we need to have legislation passed out of the Board of Aldermen no later than a few days before the January 24th deadline, and we still have no information that we need to move forward, and I didn't meet with the ownership group until January 6th.
Right, but that was the argument during the whole Rams thing, if you remember, right? They put it on the board, and then they didn't have enough information, and let's go back, and ultimately they had to rush because we have to get it by the end of the football season, because Stan Kroenke needs it, because the NFL needs it, and so they rushed it through. They changed what the word adjacent means, and they spent $17 million doing it to ultimately be told, thank you, no. And so it seems like there was more effort from the Board of Aldermen to get that done than this.
Right, and we had months and months to do it. I mean, there was a court case when you mentioned, the word adjacent. That was defined by Judge Frawley in a court case. So, we're going back months and months and months. We're talking about literally about 2 weeks here with respect to this legislation. It didn't even get introduced until the actually very last day it could have been in order for it to appear on the ballot. And then despite having not spoken to the ownership group, I was hopeful that we would get to a place where we could bring MLS to St. Louis voters.
Right, but ultimately, with that Rams deal that went sour, was never going to go to the people. This MLS ownership wants this to be voted on by the people. So ultimately, isn't it if this is what...
I don't know if it's want or has to. It has to because we're increasing a tax.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but ultimately, the voters of the city of St. Louis will decide if this is what they want. And so is there some thing that makes it easier for you to say, hey, ultimately, we're going to put it on the ballot and the voters decide? And so if the voters don't have all the information, that's a decision the voters should be able to make.
I don't feel as an elected official it's very responsible for me to put something on a ballot that I don't have answers for myself or that I don't feel comfortable voting on myself. There's just not enough information.
If this were to come down revenue neutral, ultimately in the end, would you be okay with putting this on the ballot?
Yes.
Even if it wasn't revenue neutral, but you were given all the information, would you be okay putting it on the ballot?
Possibly. I think it's really dangerous for us to go into any more debt for public subsidies on businesses that are privately owned and wealth generating for other folks in not the city.
Right. But is that your decision or is that the voters' decision?
It would depend on, that's a pretty esoteric question without more information.
Yeah. So, Christine Ingracia, St. Louis Board of Aldermen representing the 6th Ward, do you think there's enough time for you to sit down with the group and get this, all of your issues ironed out to get it a vote so it could get on the ballot?
Well, we also have a challenge because the chair of Ways and Means to which this bill has been assigned is not willing to have a committee hearing on the bill until next Thursday. So it would be very impossible for it to be on the ballot if we wait another week to pass it.
Is that Conway?
That's correct.
Yeah. Conway was my old Board of Alderman. Christine Ingracia, St. Louis Board of Alderwoman, thank you for your time.
Take care. Thanks.
758 KTRS.